Why, hello, everybody. Hi, it's Mary Cronert here on behalf of the Living Room Community Art Studio. We're here a little bit early for our Tuesday live stream artist chat at 1 p.m. And that's okay by me. That's fine by me. We're here to chat with Simone Cote today, who is another fabulous creator that we were introduced to during this last 1.5 strange years, during the pandemic. Again, someone that we might not have crossed paths with otherwise, if not for doing all this wonderful virtual Art Hive stuff. So we're so excited to be chatting with her today, learning a little bit more about who she is, what she does, why she does it, how she does it, all of those things. And you might be familiar with her if you've tuned in for any of our Wednesday live streams. And I believe Simone's also participated as a viewer, as an appreciator, just like yourself, in these, our Tuesday live stream artist chats. So if she seems a bit familiar, that's probably why. If you've ever participated in one of those activities before, chances are you may have chatted with her. You might have appreciated one of the wonderful comments that Simone shared. And today, of course, we have a chance to dig a little deeper and put a face to the chat. So without further ado, let me invite this fantastic artist on so that they can explain a little bit more about who they are and what they do. So let's see. If you can't watch now, you can always tune in later once it's been archived to catch up.
Hello!
Oh, it is fantastic to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Of course, I'm like screaming internally to be able to come here and talk with you. Very excited.
You can scream externally as well if you like.
Okay.
That's okay.
Okay, perfect.
This has been, as I was saying, an absolute pleasure because we've met so many people during the pandemic that we might not have otherwise met if not for the virtual programming we've been doing. And you are one of those people. And I remember the first time I saw your name, your avatar kind of pop up during one of our live streams, and just thinking through how you were connecting with the community, like, oh, how could I not know this person? How is it that we haven't connected before now? Because you seem just to get it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's really interesting how the internet and like social media can like help you find these like amazing art hives. I'm familiar with art hives through like Concordia and through McGill. So yeah. I know Momo. So like, I guess from seeing all those connections, I'm like, oh, the living room. Oh, it's in Oshawa. Like, how did I not know this existed? Yeah, so I'm really happy that I found the living room, that I found you, Mary, and it's been just being able to participate, whether I'm making stuff with everybody or not, just, listening. It's like been such a just enjoyable part of like my own like wellness routine, I guess, being able to tune in with you guys and, get into that creative flow and like conversations with everybody. Like it just feels like home in a sense for people maybe who are like me, who like to express themselves creatively, but like, don't maybe have like a community where they can share. So it's definitely a blessing this past weird year and a half now we've been in this pandemic, to be able to have found the living room. Like, honestly, it's been a shining beacon for this pandemic.
Oh, well, of course, that warms my heart to hear. That's so fantastic. And I feel likewise about the people we've been able to connect with through it. So, okay, before we jump into any further conversation, would you be able to introduce yourself to folks who might be watching now or once it's archived, and tell them a little bit more about who you are and what you do as an artist and maker and creative change maker?
Yes, I can try. The thing about me is like, I like to do like lots of different things at any given time. So that obviously has its pluses and its minuses, but I consider myself an arts-based researcher. So I do like arts-based research at the University of Ottawa with second language teacher candidates. So looking at using arts-based approaches in different courses for professional development, getting at these questions of identity to answer these research questions about teacher retention rates and things like that. And then I also do like mental health advocacy at the intersection of like arts and wellness. So I do like some work with Art with Impact, which is a nonprofit organization, you know, tackling, you know, stigma around mental illness and things like that. And then, yeah, I'm also like a maker of things, an artist, or, you know, I don't know. I have like trouble with that label sometimes. I think
Yeah.
I prefer the label maker because like I don't stick to one thing. Like I don't just paint or I don't just whatever. I love to learn like lots of new things and just like make things, especially small things I'm really into right now, like miniature things. I like that. So that's me in a nutshell.
Oh, wow, so much. Where do I dive in? Okay. All right, well, let's tuck into the part about being an arts-based researcher a little bit more,
Yeah.
because as you know, my background, as you know, is partially rooted in art therapy and being an art therapist. And I know that research and like incorporating the arts into research has always been, people are fascinated by it. And there's also a lot of questions about how do you do that? How do you know, where's the data? What does the data look like? How do you use the information that you gather? Can you talk a little bit more about what drew you to that field of practice and what it's like to explore creativity through that lens?
Yeah, for sure. That's a really great question. Lots of complexity there.
Yeah.
I guess I would start with like my background is in sociology. So I did a Bachelor of Arts in sociology here in Toronto, and I think like through that it's really asking all those like why questions. And so, you know, when I went through the program, we had to do both like quantitative and qualitative stuff, like stats courses and then like, you know, methods courses and things like that. And I kind of it wasn't really until my master's that I learned like I guess scientifically there's kind of two like approaches. You know, the one approach is kind of following this logic of like repetition, or like you kind of want to see, you're trying to kind of like I guess get things out of people. And
Hmm.
then the other logic is sort of this logic of discovery where like
Yeah.
you don't really know like what's happening, and like that's kind of the point. Like you want to use these kind of different qualitative approaches to get at all those like why questions, those like really important questions that we can't really answer with the what kind of quantitative approach.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what drew me to it, because I think I don't know, I really find that like there's complexity and like so much in terms of like research, and I think like qualitative approaches really get at that. And like depending on the theories that you're using, like I use like post-structuralism a lot, which is like multiple meanings, like plurality of like, you know, how people can understand themselves, and like yeah, like you can feel this way and this way at the same time, like all of those like things that just, yeah, I don't know, I that really interests me. And I think yeah, arts-based approaches are, you know, additionally just a really great way to like communicate with people and using a different kind of skill set, or a different kind of, I don't know, you don't really need that many skills, but it's just like conceptually it's a bit different. So
Mm.
especially for people who haven't engaged in arts-based approaches, a lot of the time we find like it's a very transformative experience, because
Mm.
it's accessing a different part of themselves that maybe they haven't explored before.
It sounds like as a participant in research like that, it would actually, for me as a participant, be much more rewarding. It feels like there's an opportunity for me to learn and grow and discover as well, and not
Yes.
just someone who's, you know, regurgitating information.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like
Yeah.
generally like for the, you know, visual methods is kind of like another kind of branch, like arts-based methods and visual participatory methods, like they kind of all like go into each other. But
Yeah.
like one of the principles for visual like research is like the democratization of knowledge. Like you should you know, instill like a collaborative kind of experience where the person can sort of member check like, oh, I know I said that about my thing, but like now I kind of think this way. And like so you include
Yeah.
all of those, you know, important things in your reporting, because yeah, like things can change over time. And I think it's just a really great principle or value in research to just make it more democratic. I think that's really important.
I love that. And there's a whole bunch of hearts coming up for folks who are watching. Welcome, folks. If you've just tuned in now, we're talking to Simone Cote. And right now we're talking about arts-based research. And I love that aspect of how it's deconstructing some of the old school ways of doing things and really providing a platform for folks with lived experience to make their voices heard, or to have aspects of their lives and experiences recognized or affirmed. Um, do you have a favorite approach when you're working in that? Like, is it visual arts based, or, I mean, there's so many different ways of doing this. I was mentioning before when we were chatting, I have a friend, Julia Gray, who is also known as Possible Arts CA, and she went through this extraordinary arts-based research project with the Health Network, the Universal Health Network, exploring impacts of dementia and memory loss upon caregivers, and they created a play at the end of it. So there's so many different ways to use the knowledge that's gathered in processes like these. What's your favorite approach?
Oh, there's so many. I think the ones I use the most are probably more visual and like writing. So like we did some like poetry exercises specific to this research at the University of Ottawa. We did some poetry exercises. We did some like we called them plurilingual portraits. So it's like getting at these like different aspects of like identity through doing like a silhouette. Like it doesn't have to be, you know, whatever. And then sort of using color or, you know, different symbols to kind of think about like identity and think about complexity and identity and intersections and all those like really great things. So I'd say like definitely more visual, but like I'm totally aware of like, especially with dementia or with Alzheimer's research, I've also, you know, seen and read about like the use of singing and in terms of memory and music and things like that, and how just like how beneficial that can be for memory and things like that for people who deal with that. So yeah, I think like there's so many approaches, but I guess, I don't know, my favorite, I guess visual things. Like I love color. I love like texture, like things like that. So I think I guess I gravitate more towards those. But again, like I love trying lots of different things. So I couldn't say for sure, I guess.
Multidisciplinary maker. That's what we can call, because I can relate to that.
Okay.
I can relate to that too. Master of none, kind of appreciator of everything.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. So, okay. So visual arts, and that makes me, when you're talking about color, and I feel like there's a language in all expressive modalities that kind of crosses language barriers in a lot of cases.
Yes.
And I suppose that's one really wonderful thing about visual arts, is that we can look at something and each one of us will have a relationship with that or be able to dialogue with that piece in some way. Even if we've never met the person who created it, even if they speak a different language and live in a different place with a completely different set of experiences than us, it can still help us connect and find common ground. I love that you found your way into this field of practice. And it doesn't surprise me at all that there's an overlay with mental health and wellness. It feels that those two things are so compatible. How would you be able to speak a little bit about how you found your way into being an advocate for, you know, mental health and wellness and all the things that come along with that?
Yes, so many wonderful intersections there. I
Yeah.
totally agree. I come from like an arts-based household, so like growing up, like my mom is a painter. She has been for like over 30 years now. So I was introduced into the art world in terms of like getting into a gallery, like pricing your pieces, like all of those things. But then also like just like artists, like lots of different things. Like she had different mentors, like who would make like sculptures out of like the randomest recycled materials kind of thing, like old car parts or like things like that. And like just being exposed to all these different things, and like music too, like singing. Like she taught I'm a family of 4 kids, so she taught all of us like, kind of like how to sing, like, you know, dance, like musical theater. Like we used to do like performances in our solarium in Winnipeg when we lived there, for like people who would come over, you know, at Christmas or whatever. Like we were very like expressive. Like there were so many things. And then I learned the piano as well growing up. And then, you know, a little bit later I got into the guitar, and then poetry, and then like all these different things. I always really enjoyed as a kid, like writing in a journal. Like writing is something that I have always really liked to do as well, just to like dump your thoughts and like express kind of like what's going on and to cope. Yeah, and I would say like I do struggle with like anxiety that's like stems from kind of like traumatic experiences. So I'd say like on a personal level, I'm also motivated in this field because I see these different modes of creative expression as something that's like, it's so natural for me, and it's been very powerful. Like, of course, like at sometimes like difficult, you know, to sit with those emotions and to sit with those experiences, but it's been like, I wouldn't take anything back from it. Like I strongly believe that like those are the ways, if you can establish those kind of tools for yourself, those are the ways that you're gonna find more peace and like manage, you know, whatever's going on better for yourself, so that you know, you feel good generally, or you know, you can manage, you know, when things do come up. I just think expressive tools, creative tools are so powerful, and like the fact that there's so many to choose from, so many sources of inspiration, it's like I was just reading, it's not so much like making something from nothing, it's like making something in spite of like everything that you could, right? So
Yeah.
it's a really wonderful thing, I think. And like, yeah, like despite my experiences, I think just being like creative has like really, really helped me in my own journey.
I felt the same way. I think that was actually one of the reasons why I think if not for my creative practices, like for example, I think about being an actor, which is one of the things I do as well. Like that taught me how to cope with so many things. I didn't know that it was helping me heal or helping me manage things. It was just through that process of doing the thing and trusting in that process that I realized, oh, wait, I'm actually managing this other thing that is very difficult for me at the same time through doing those things. And oh, wait, I can transfer those skills that I apply to this task within this area into my life as well. So it's a fascinating process that I love it. And it does help us sit with things, right? That's such an abstract phrase sometimes, don't you think? When people say, oh, just sit with it.
Yeah. There's an Instagram account called Sit With It. That's like
There is?
myself. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's a bit conceptual, but it's really true. Like just being able to acknowledge when you're feeling like anxious or stressed or like frustrated or like whatever. There's so many different emotions, and to be able to label that, like even like the topic of the inner critic, like I didn't really like know like what that was. Like I kind of just thought, it wasn't until later in my like creative whatever personality, like until later in life, like young adulthood, that I kind of realized like, oh, like that happens, or like that can happen. Like I just kind of considered it like, oh, it's just part of like making art. Like sometimes you like, it just like doesn't go so well, or like you can't, you know, your body's kind of telling you like, oh, like no, like I can't do this right now. I just thought like, oh, that's just kind of part of it. But being able to label it was like, oh, like that's something I need to like you know, give space to. Like that's something I need to like be like try to be aware of, like as hard as it is sometimes. But yeah, totally.
Well, recognizing that it's something we can actively work on rather than just experiencing or have happen to us, I think is a huge part. Like that's one of the reasons why, for folks who might be watching who aren't familiar with the term, it's a term lots of folks use, but we use it at the Living Room too, to that idea of the inner critic as being part
Bossy.
of those
Bossy.
Yes. Part of those inner voices that we sometimes experience, like some, I guess in other circles they might call it negative self-talk, or like just those kind of critical, overly critical messages that we at first seem like they're coming from ourselves, from within ourselves, but when we really look at them, at least for myself, I don't, more often than not, they tend to be attached to people outside of us or systems outside of us that we've internalized over time.
Yes.
So yeah, tell me a little bit more about that, because it sounds like you've had quite a journey, especially over the last year and a half, having an opportunity to dialogue with that inner critic.
Yeah. I would say like, honestly, I think like people my age, so like I'm in like my mid-20s. So I think like people my age now, I think like with social media and things like that, like I think we're all dealing with that, like to a certain extent, just like insecurity, like just like with social media, I mean to say like the way things are set up, especially for like arts things, it's like, well, first of all, like everybody's perfect, right? Like people rarely post like things, like everybody says that, right? But I also think like specific to art stuff, it's like you see this video and like they do this thing in like 30 seconds and then it's like perfect and you're like, oh, okay, like I should be able to do that in that time or like whatever. And it's really the case that it took them like hours or sometimes like days or weeks to like put that whole thing together, and then it ends up being this 30-second thing, right? So I think like there are lots of examples on social media where like it's basically just giving us this script where it's like, yeah, like you should, it's like this false expectation. It's like it's not real. It's just, I don't know, and it's really powerful, I think, like especially for people my age, just because like we grew up with it to a certain extent too. But I think specific for me, for people like me who have gone through childhood trauma, who have, you know, experienced complex trauma like over like years, and who are like beginning healing and realizing like, you know, they deal with anxiety, they deal with depression, whatever it might be. Specific to those people, I think they also deal with that in a different way where it's like that was modeled for them, the idea that you have to meet certain expectations and that you can't really be yourself. So I think, yeah, I just think like, I don't know, using arts-based approaches can just kind of like, it can help you with that for sure. I kind of forgot what we were talking about for a second, to be honest.
That's okay. I'm loving this thread. We'll come around. It'll all come around. Well, inner critic, we were talking about inner critic, but I think it all ties together. It all connects. And you were mentioning social media and the enormous and fairly recent pressures that have come along with that. We have this excellent platform, many platforms where we can connect and create and share and shine a light on things, and also have really like surprisingly authentic moments. Like it's all possible there. And then the flip side of that is I just spent half a day making a 30-second TikTok video that I'm not happy with because, you know, or, you know, capturing just the appearance, the performative kind of appearance-based stuff that makes us think if we don't achieve this, or if there's not this many likes, or if no one seems to be watching, it's hard sometimes not to take that as a personal hit, you know?
Yeah. And I think like, especially for people who like grew up with that and had that modeled for them, it's like all the more important to like recognize when it's happening. And like, of course it's kind of frustrating, like, because I consider, you know, making things or doing art to be like an enjoyable experience, but like to have it not be an enjoyable experience is kind of like frustrating sometimes. But I think like just the act of like recognizing that it's not, today's like not the day to like do it or like do something else. And like using, like I was saying before, like I think using arts-based approaches can really like help you with that. It just kind of expanding on what I was saying before, it's kind of just like which one would be best. Like I think for grounding, like something that I've learned from you, Mary, is like the spiral thing. Like I did that last night and just sort of like breathing and like tracing your pen and like kind of just tuning into like your breath, and like, you know, one day you might go really fast, and so like maybe that's telling you something. Like your emotions, I think, like are information, and like I'd be like interested in developing like kind of different art space like practices depending on like what your mood is, or like kind of what you can be like capable of, I guess, in that moment. I think that would be like really smart to do.
Well, you've just made me think too of it. Like I love that idea that like emotions are information. They're things we experience that help us understand where we're at, perhaps give us an idea of where we want to be, or where we can move to or through, but they're not necessarily like they don't define us in any one moment as is, right? And the same I think about different art expressions and how we express it. Like I can, like especially in relation to that idea of the inner critics, there are some days where I want to create something for a specific reason, and I put these expectations on myself, and what I end up with is so far from that. And I have to go through that journey during that process of saying, well, am I going to allow myself to be mean to myself? Am I going to tolerate, you know, whatever this voice is? Because I do have a whole bunch of inner critics. There's not just one. There are so many. There's, you know, a choir. But it is an interesting process to use art to say, well, okay, we can have the same exercise, for example, like the spiral. And one day it can be the thing that helps ground us and helps us feel relaxed and flowy. And the next day it can be the thing that lets us know, holy moly, I am so tightly wound right now that I need to try something else. Like this has just helped focus me with what I'm going on, like what's inside, but it's information to help me do something else instead. Like,
yes.
I don't know what I'm talking about now either. It's lovely. It's all
Yeah.
fantastic.
No, I totally agree. And like, I think like even to have the thought like, oh, am I gonna be mean to myself? Like
Mm,
that for me, that's what I kind of meant before, where it's like I just thought that's like part of like making art is like sometimes like you things don't go as planned, so you know, whatever. But actually being able to like label that and say like, oh, okay, no, like I still like I not that I control myself, but like I have control over like how I'm you know how I'm approaching this and like yeah
mhm.
maybe this is telling me like I should go write a poem like there's something going on I like maybe that's what I need to do or singing or like listening to music or like these different things or like maybe just like you know listening to a podcast or like listening to other people like maybe your emotions are telling you like I need more of like a social connection or like things like that. I don't know, that takes a lot of work to be able to like have that awareness like have that
Yeah.
clarity that that's what you need. I think like just you know using those different creative approaches can even help you understand like you know oh actually this is how I'm really feeling kind of thing and that's like really powerful because I don't know it's not again like it's not an easy thing to do like it's not an easy thing to recognize and label how you're really feeling sometimes because we could
Yeah.
be feeling so many things at one time. um yeah.
And that comes back to that, like, can I say that word today? Pluralistic uh,
Yes.
awareness. Just that it never is, it doesn't have to be just one thing, that we can feel many things at the same time. And even within that, there's an agency and empowerment that, so if that's the case, and, you know, you can recognize or begin to practice how to recognize what we're feeling, what we're experiencing in the moment, then we can get specific and we can say, well, you know what, I'm going to follow that today, or you know, this voice is less critical than that voice, so I'll dialogue with that instead and see how it helps move me forward, how it helps me find relief, or you know, my way to the next thing that will be better for me, healthier for me.
Yes.
Right?
A lot of it too I think is like you don't have to be good like
Yeah.
I think that's like a huge thing for me. It's like because like I think for me like I get so excited about things so I'm like
Yeah.
oh my god I can't wait to do this like I'm so and then like it's I rush it and it's like it just turns into this thing where it's like not great and I don't know it just I have so much energy that it's like I can't like channel it properly sometimes and then yeah and then it turns up being like oh my god like why did I like rush this like I didn't need to finish this right now like but it's just because like I get so excited and I'm like oh my god like this is so cool but like actually taking the time to be like okay like this is what I can do today to start this thing and then like just the idea of like that you have to finish it like right away. I feel like what we were talking about in terms of social media like maybe where that kind of messaging is coming in that like it
Yeah.
has to be one and done kind of thing when I think there's so much power in like giving yourself time to like really enjoy something or like really ground yourself
Yeah.
and just yeah just like spend that time. I think yeah that's something I'm still kind of working on too is like just like slowing down or you know like we were saying before like changing what you're doing depending on like what your mood is because some days like even if I'm really excited about doing this project one day the next day like I might not want to do it that day like
Yeah.
I might need something different right and it's important to know that because you don't want to force yourself to do something that you really do want to do like that you're excited about that you're inspired about when you're really not feeling it and like you don't
It's
have to make stuff every day either like it's yeah anyway.
No, that's, I think, such an excellent point, because it's, again, listening and learning how to listen to that part of yourself so that you don't, um, come away from the experience, or you can come away from the experience feeling a kind of flow or satisfaction or peace or contentment with where you're at right now. Like
Mm-hmm.
Zombie Art Squad, they're like hashtag like work in progress, like being
Yes.
able to not only accept what we're creating in that headspace, but also ourselves in that space.
Mm-hmm.
That the art can't happen without us. So if we need to walk away, or if we need to do something differently, or not do anything at all, that is an important and really helpful recognition, like of ourselves, and honoring ourselves in that process. That we are works in process as well.
Yes.
Um, but yeah,
I love that.
the one and done thing is, a very interesting thing. But also the mess thing too, because as you were talking, I was thinking about that. Like, it's okay to make a mess. I feel like I've had to learn that over and over again through my life. Like, it's okay, especially through art. Like, that's a great place if you're going to make a mess.
Mm-hmm.
Use art to do it. And if I don't like it, that's okay. And I think allowing that space in our creative life to, you know, I rush through something and it turns out like a big glob of goo. Like,
Yeah.
well, it's a big glob of goo. That's okay. It is what it is. And, you know, next time I create it, it'll be different, you know?
Yes, I have paintings like that, like fluid art paintings where it's just like you can see in the painting like there's just like frustration. But like
Yeah.
I don't know, I actually like it now. Like but during it I was like, oh my god, this is like so annoying.
Yeah.
But then it's like kind of a snapshot of like how I was really feeling and like I don't know, maybe you know during it I was like this is terrible, but now I'm like oh actually like that is good, kind of a good reminder to have. Like it doesn't have to be like good and you don't have to be like always like in a amazing mood when you're like doing things. I don't know, I think it's really powerful.
It's so powerful. Well, that kind of connects back to that weird saying, the sit with it saying, right? Like making art and allowing ourselves to make the mess. And yes, Zombie Art Squad, the dress to make a mess. Absolutely. Everyone needs a good set of art clothes, I think, but that's just my.
Yeah, I have a smock, but like I always forget to put it on. Like I always end up getting paint in my hair or like on like the back of my arm or basically anywhere. It's I don't know. I think that's very relatable.
Yeah.
Paint on all the clothes.
Well, that's sometimes part of the process as well for me when I get, as you were saying, really excited about something. It's like, well, I don't want to wait. I don't want to have to, if I don't, there's this irrational fear that if I wait, that I'll miss something or,
Yeah.
you know, like I've got to go with that flow immediately, which sometimes comically, and there are worse things that can happen, but yeah, can result on, you know, my coffee table, my downstairs coffee table resembling a paint palette instead of
Mm-hmm.
a coffee table.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, you know what, that's okay. At the end of the day, you know, finding my peace with that is okay. And recognizing it, I think, like the more I become aware of these impulses in myself, then I can learn how to shift them, or at least, you know, question, make choices about things, have the freedom
Yes.
and I suppose that's what empowerment is, knowing that we can make choices if we want, when we want. That's a really important part of the creative process, as well as the humaning process
Yeah.
too.
And like finding different things that you like. I think for me, like I kind of go through phases where it's like I'm really into like fluid art right now, or like I'm really into like the resin stuff or things like that. And then after a while, I'm like, okay, I need something different. But also coming back to things that you know you're familiar with. Like for me, like music, I think has been always like something that's like really powerful. Like knowing how to sing, like knowing how to play an instrument, and just being able to sort of be in the flow with like other people and like playing music together and kind of have that like synergy. It's like it's simple, but it's something that's like really powerful to like being able to like connect like with other people and like have that. I think like knowing what makes you feel good when in terms of like creative stuff is also important, and like exploring that if you know if you don't know, like just you know thinking about what inspires me or like what brings me joy or like all those really important questions. And yeah, just like what makes me feel good. I think that's always a good place to start.
If you can follow that. Yeah, I think there's sometimes when people come into the studio, there have been moments where they don't consider themselves artists and they'll say it up front, oh, I'm not an artist. I'm not an artist. And what it turns out to be is kind of, again, connected to the inner critic idea, but also how sometimes we can become so aware of the external eye and the perceived judgments that other people have on us, because it, you know, you'll learn after connecting with them for a few moments that in fact they are so creative and there's so many different things that they do to express themselves, but perhaps they're judging what they're doing. So because it's not painting or because it's not, you know, playing the piano, it's something that you know, they feel shouldn't be or isn't appreciated as an art form, or that people have judged them, you know, that, oh, it's just cross stitch, or it's just cosplay, or it's just, you know, whatever it might be, that they've kind of decided that it's not art because they've listened to those external voices and the judgment that comes along with them sometimes. But I think if it gives you pleasure, that's a very powerful thing. Mm-hmm. Pleasure is powerful.
Yeah, and like just like I guess like being open. Like yeah. I don't know how to play the tambourine, but like if I hear a guitar and I hear somebody on the drums playing a beat, I can like, you know, like figure it out. And I think that's also just like depending on people's like personality. Like maybe people are less like creatively inclined, but like just being able to grow that like openness kind of mindset, like just to be able to like try stuff, because like you might not know that you enjoy something until you try it, kind of thing. You might not know that something makes you feel good until you play the tambourine or like try. Yeah. And like that is also something that's like really powerful too, just like cultivating that like openness to trying like different things. And like I feel like I said this before, but like just not having those like expectations that like it has to be good the first time. Like, hello, is anything ever good the first time you do something? Like, no. It's like this false, I don't know, it's like this really powerful like false narrative that I think like, I don't know what kind of influences are coming in there, whether it's like technology or things like that, but it's so ingrained, and it's like it's really important to just like be messy, like make mistakes, like, and I feel like that's so powerful, because that is not just about art. That I feel like that goes cross bounds, like anything, like anything you're trying for the first time, expect to fail. Like you should completely expect that, because you don't really know, like, and you have to go through the experience, and you have to keep learning and being open to it. Like that's how you really master something, I think.
And maybe reframing the whole thing to begin with, like you're saying, like why ever worry about making good, like something good? Like maybe if we switch out the word good for authentic, like I feel authentic will always, from a creator perspective, be so much more rewarding than trying to do something good, because what does good mean? It's like asking, like making, you know, being perfect, or, you know, that I feel sometimes has more to do what other people want or expect, or what we think they want or expect, than what we want. And it takes me back to the spiral, because that I think it's no secret that I'm a huge fan of Linda Berry, and that's one of the exercises she gives her students. And I love the fact that Linda Berry over so many years has built up a creative practice that has everything to do with being authentic and like satisfying for her, but nothing to do with being good. Like, I don't think, you know, when you read, I don't know if you've ever read any Linda Berry. I totally recommend it, folks, if you haven't. Oh, amazing. But it has more to do with just giving it and trying, like you were saying. Like, if you enjoy something and someone tells you that it's ugly, but you enjoy doing it, screw them. Keep doing it. Yeah. Like that's a very clear example of a physicalized like critic standing in the world. And if we let that, I mean, it's hard sometimes not to let that come in, but that's how I feel sometimes those internal inner critics get their foothold in us. You know, the first time we say, oh, maybe you're right. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this, or maybe I should do it differently. I don't know. Yeah.
Part of it for me too is like, sometimes I feel like when the inner critic comes in, or like kind of that negative talk comes in when I'm doing something, it's like, I immediately am like, oh no, like, no, I don't want to feel bad. Like, no, this has got to stop. And that's not helpful, because something I think is really powerful is like, it's okay if that happens.
Yeah,
like,
that's
that
true.
needs to be okay, because if you're trying to block that, that's not gonna, like, that's just gonna make you feel, I don't know, like even worse, like you can't breathe almost, in a sense, because you're not letting yourself like feel that, like that is happening, and like it's important to like let that happen. I think that's been really powerful for me, because it's like, okay, I need to stop kind of doing this, like, okay, like this is happening, and just like, I mean, we probably said this before, but just like acknowledging that, I think like, like if that happens, like that happens, like that's part of it too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And oh, yes, yes, yes. And Zombie Art Squad again saying art trauma, question mark. Early art experiences are so formative. And I think sometimes, yeah,
Mm.
uh, for a lot of people out there, it seems to be a common thing. Like the those early moments where we are in that flow and appreciative, like the inner critic voices are so often they're not ours. But you're right. If we don't acknowledge them, if we can't acknowledge them, I think they'll just be louder. It's like
Yes,
pretending. It's like
completely.
it's like pretending that, you know, like for myself, someone again who struggles with anxiety and depression, like if I pretend it's not happening, then it'll only get louder. The longer I ignore it or try to be normal and try to look like I'm
Yeah,
fine,
yeah.
it's, you know, it's not helpful or healthy at all. So I think that acknowledgement piece is really, really important.
Yeah, and it's like what we were saying before, like emotions are information. Like they're
Yeah.
not really like bad or good. Like there really isn't that, or there shouldn't really be like that distinction, right? It's just like, oh, this is happening. Like let me recognize that and like
Yeah.
just kind of give it some room, give her some space, kind of thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever given like shape or form to any of those inner critics? Have you ever explored like externalizing them through art?
I think like mostly through poetry.
Mm.
I have a lot of like working through like trauma and like working through some like just like bad situations that
Mm.
like I was in. I think like using words actually was more helpful to me. That's what I think about like my two poetry books. Those are books that like I wrote and they just really helped me kind of, I don't know, like try to understand like what I was going through. During that time I was having like really strange, like vivid dreams, and I would like wake up and like just kind of like try to write down, okay, like what happened in this dream, and like I would end up kind of turning it into a poem just so that I could like kind of see like what's going on back there when I'm trying to sleep, kind of thing. Like
Yeah.
it helped me understand kind of how I was reacting to what was going on, and like, you know, I guess it's not just words, but it's the imagery too, right? Like, you know, what do those visuals mean? Like, why was this color, or things like that, or you know,
Mm.
why was I here? Why is this person in it? Like things like that. I think like just combining that imagery with like the words and things like that. I think like that is something that has helped me, yeah, just like get through those like really challenging things when it's hard to like express that, because it can be really complex. Like there can be lots of emotions like going on at the same time, and yeah, it's just like it's just also just like challenging as
Yeah.
well, like to go through that and then to like, you know, try to express it. But I definitely found like poetry and like slam poetry too to be really like very powerful, because it's especially when you go through that stuff, I feel like a lot of times you don't feel like you have a voice, or like you feel alone, and like to just put your voice into words and to have, you know, the imagery that goes along with that, and it's totally you, like it's totally authentic to you and your experience and like what you've gone through, and then to like perform it and then have other people like be snapping with you and like getting into that flow, the performative
Yeah.
aspect, that is like currency. That is like amazing. That is like very healing, I think.
I would love, love, love to do that. I think after a year and a half without community connection in person or any kind of gathering, that's one of the things that's at the top of my list. I'd like to have some kind of spoken word event
Mm-hmm.
where we can space out to give space for those things, and just to be in concert with one another in that way. Yeah, it's an extraordinary and beautiful thing. When did you first turn to writing? When was it that you knew, okay, this is how I can do this?
Yeah, I think like it was early on. Like I must have been like 7 when I started like my Harriet the Spy like journals, where
Yeah.
I have those like things that you buy at those composition books you buy at the dollar store, and I would just like fill them. Like I had so many of those books. But it wasn't until like I would say high school when I took like a creative or writer's craft course where we actually had to write like a slam poem, and like going through the process of like what do I want it to be about, like, you know, where do I go with this, like the teacher was like, you know, there was a lot of freedom, like you kind of make it like about whatever you wanted, and yeah, I would say like through that, I just grew a love for poetry, and then I kept going with it. Like I just kept writing things. I kept writing little poems, and I ended up making 2 books as well from that. And it's something I think that really helped me throughout my teenage years. But I definitely think writing is something, and using writing as like a form of expression, whether it's like just like a thought dump or just working through stuff like that's happening around you, especially as a kid too.
Yeah.
Something that's really helpful, because it's giving it that voice that otherwise it just kind of sits there, and it's a lot, especially for a child to handle, right? So
Yeah.
finding, for me, I think when I was younger, it was definitely writing. I mean, I enjoyed lots of things, but I remember writing the most because I was always writing in that book, in all those books. So yeah, that, and then it sort of went into poetry when I was more in my teen years.
That's amazing. And the self-publishing process, that's an extraordinary step to take as well. Like what did that feel like?
Yeah, it was just a couple years ago that I like went through that process of like, okay, like how do I want to make this into a book. Like I took some cool photos, and one of them is actually a painting that I painted.
Oh, wow.
I can't talk. So I was like, oh, I definitely want this to be the cover. Like, I think this is really cool. And just going through the process of like, yeah, just like using the application to like make sure that it looked okay, and like even like how I wanted it to read, like adding like a table of contents so you can see like different like the different titles of the poems, or should I have it more like the first one's more like a book where it's like it just kind of it's all kind of one narrative, and just like exploring like how you can present, I guess, the poetry, like present it. Yeah, I would say like finding the self-publishing was definitely hard, just like with money and stuff like that. Like some of them take a lot more than they probably need to, but I used Lulu Publishing, which I found like their platform was like also pretty easy to use, like pretty user friendly.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I really enjoyed doing it. Like I printed off all the poems, and then I'm like, okay, like where do I want this to start? Like where is the beginning and where is the end, kind of thing. And even like doing that was like really therapeutic, like just seeing the threads in between the poems, and like, oh, this kind of is like a narrative of like this time in my life. And then the second one kind of like approaching it a bit differently, like it's different chapters in a book kind of thing. Yeah, I found it a very enjoyable experience overall, because I was really just like open to like making a book and like having a book. I really wanted that as like a, yeah, just not a trophy, but like a, just something material that I could, have and be like, okay, yeah, this represents like this time in my life, and like that's important to me.
Yeah. Well, I think for some folks, making meaning of our experiences in that way, it can look like so many different things. I mean, for one person, it might be buying a Corvette or something. Like this symbolizes where I am in my life right now, or where I've come from and how I've gotten here. But I think for folks who are perhaps more creatively inclined, it's evidence, it's proof that we are here, that we mean something, that our voice matters. And I imagine, I'm just, when you were talking about laying out all the all the poems, all the pieces, it feels a little bit like just looking over a life, and
Yes, completely.
and being able to, for the first time, perhaps arrange it in a way that feels right to you. So perhaps not having control in the past, as so many of us didn't, there's an opportunity to take all those pieces and bring them together in a way that makes meaning and feels good for you. That is a really powerful thing.
Yeah, and like that idea of like you get to decide.
Yeah.
Like you didn't get to decide, and like those things happened to you and they shouldn't have happened to you, and that's like terrible. But now you get to decide like how this story is read. Like you get to decide how you want to tell this story.
Yeah.
Like I really enjoyed doing that. Like all the poems on the floor, and like it took me a while to like, where are the threads here? Like, oh, this is interesting. And like I found a lot of new like insights from it that I like didn't have when I was writing the poems, because I even like choosing which ones to go in the first book, and like all those things, like, oh, which poems do I want, which poems represent this time in my life, like that, the kind of, I guess, more like reflection like process with them was something also that I found like really therapeutic, because it's the same theme. Like you get to decide, like you are you, and whatever is authentic to you is you know what you can make. Like
Yeah,
that's something that's really powerful.
that's amazing. And I'm imagining there are folks out there watching or listening who would love to do that for themselves. Any recommendations about that specific thing, about self-publishing, or what they can do with that?
Yeah, I would say, like, honestly, I just did a Google search of like how to self-publish your poem, and like just like kind of do like your own like research, just like browsing like in terms of how to use like the applications, like to add like the images and things like that, like which ones I guess like are you know, you find that you can use like pretty okay. Like I'm not like like really tech savvy, so like I used one that was probably more user friendly, but I'm sure there's other ones that can do lots of other cool, amazing things. So yeah, just like kind of going through the process of like doing a bit of your own research, and then making sure you see how much money they take off your books every time you make it, because some are more than others, so be wary of that.
Yeah, that's the tricky bit. So, well, I guess, we're running close to the end of our chat, and this flew by. I would like to touch upon that. That's the last thing. If folks want to support you, or like through purchasing your books, or do you sell any other art as well? Because I have been looking at that cool, super beautiful resin work you've been doing recently.
Yes, so I make like lots of like different resin things. Like I have like sets of like coasters and things like that I do sell. Like I can do like custom things as well. All my resin works for sale. You can buy my poetry books if you type in Betty Goodman by Simone Cote. You'll find it on the Lulu Publishing. The first one looks like this, and the second one I already showed, it looks like this. Yeah, and like anything that I sell, you can also find, just message me through my Artistry Wellness account on Instagram.
Okay. Oh yeah, and Artistry Wellness. We didn't even really talk about that platform.
I know.
I'm so sorry. So Artistry Wellness, in a quick kind of wrap up, what is Artistry and Wellness, and how can people support that or be supported through it?
Yes, so Artistry Wellness is a platform that I created alongside my thesis research when I was doing my Master's of Education at McGill, all about, how to deal with stress, like how to deal with distress, and using arts-based approaches to do that. So it's a kind of an exploratory platform where I share kind of different techniques, different arts-based practices I use for my own like wellness, and yeah, just like generally a page for like inspiration to inspire others to make things, and also having really candid conversations about stigma to do with mental illness, and yeah, just healing and all those really amazing things. I often try to create a dialogue about those things as well when I'm thinking about art and making art. So yeah, check it out if you have a chance.
Amazing. So that's Artistry Wellness, and people can also purchase things if they see things they like through that account as well.
Yeah, you can just direct message me. I can do custom things as well for all the resin stuff.
Yay. Oh, it's been such a pleasure having you here today, and I knew that the time would fly. I just knew it would.
Me too. Thank you. It's been so nice to talk, honestly.
I know.
I'm still internally screaming.
Well, I have a feeling this won't be the last time that folks see your face and that we have an opportunity to connect. So yeah, perhaps there are more ways in the future that we can collaborate and support the work that one another, that we're doing out there, and help our communities feel connected and supported through whatever happens next. Thank you so much for joining me, Simone.
Thank you. Have a lovely day.
You too. Any last words you'd like to throw out there for the community? Anything else?
If you can feel, you can create.
I love it. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, Simone.
You too.
We'll see you again soon. Bye. And that was Simone Cote. Fabulous, fabulous Simone. It was such a pleasure speaking with you today and chatting with you. People, if you enjoyed that, then why don't you go and follow Artistry Wellness and show them some support, connect with Simone, learn more about what she does, perhaps even purchase some of her poetry. Yeah, it's important to support one another during these times as much as we can. And we're not all in a place where we can do that. But if you can, I invite you to consider doing so. Again, it's just always such a pleasure every week to come on here and chat with another fabulous creator, community change maker, artist extraordinaire. And yeah, leaving this chat today, what am I taking away with me? I suppose I'm taking away those thoughts of acknowledgement, like being able to acknowledge those things that I'm feeling and working through, practicing acknowledging and learning from them so that I can take better care of myself and allow myself to express what I need to express in the moment, even if it is ugly art, even if it is just making a mess. Making a mess is an extraordinary thing to do. And yeah, so hey, homework. Folks, make some ugly art. Make a mess. See what happens if you set out with that intention to allow yourself, to give yourself permission to create something messy, and be kind to yourself as you do it. See what happens. I'd love to learn more about how that goes for you. Anyways, thanks so much for joining us. And thank you, Simone, for being here and sharing your art and your heart with the community. Until we can connect and create with one another again, I look forward to connecting and creating with you right here online on Instagram and over on the Living Room Community Art Studios Facebook page too. I'll be there every Wednesday, tomorrow, 2 to 3:30 p.m. Drop by, say hi, and make some art with us if you can. Bye, folks. Thanks so much.